for Southampton. Coventry could and should have cleared it. Le Tissier went for goal! Fantastic goal! That's what this man is all about. Le Tissier went for goal! Fantastic goal!
Pitch again, here's Le Tissier facing May once more. He's round Pallister, he's round May. Oh, and he chips Schmeichel, and that is a sublime piece of skill.
One of those arcing runs of adventure and letting fly. Oh, and scoring a terrific goal.
A minute to play, plus stoppage time. Here's Le Tissier. Oh, better to say farewell.
So Matt, it's such a privilege to have you here. Welcome to India.
Thank you.
Welcome to Njogo. Welcome to the Sporting Spree, our podcast, and welcome to BBFS.
Thank you very much.
You have your exploits are there for the entire world to see, right? And you have excelled at the highest level. And we keep getting so many queries from parents, from players, aspiring young players, how to become a professional player. So we would just like to, over the course of the next few minutes, we would like to understand more from you about your own experience in that entire journey, so that other younger players can make their lives better as well, learning from you. So I would start by going back to the very starting point. When did you start playing football? Do you really remember the first time you remember having kicked a ball?
Yeah, so it was very young. I remember having a ball at my feet from maybe the age of 3, 4, 5 years of age. I grew up in a very sporting family. Mm-hmm. So I had 3 big brothers who are 4, 6 and 7 years older than me. All of them very good sportsmen themselves. 2 of them probably, I would say, equally as talented at football as I was. So sport was just kind of what we did. That was part of everyday life growing up in Guernsey. So I had a head start on a lot of people, I think, given the history of my family and the ability that was in my family. And yeah, I loved football from an early age, and I just was fascinated by being able to keep the ball up, to pass the ball, to try different things. And I loved the game from a very, very early age.
Yeah, I mean, that was very visible when you during your playing days as a professional as well, because you would always play with a smile on your face. But what about the role of your parents? Like, of course, you had 3 elder brothers who would take you to play every day. But then what about the parents? Did your parents support you a lot in terms of, or did they ask you to study more, play less?
No, they were very good. I think they knew from a very early age that, I wanted to be a footballer. So they never discouraged me from playing sport. They weren't. They did encourage me to study a little bit, and make sure that I got through school okay. But they weren't. They weren't very pushy parents when it came to the school stuff. But they were incredibly supportive of all of our boys, all 3 of my brothers and myself, in supporting all the sports that we played in. And they would drive us everywhere around the island to play the sports. Luckily, the island was very small, so the journeys weren't very far, not like your journey.
Yes.
So, a long journey in the car for me was like 15 minutes when I was growing up, because the whole island is like 5 kilometers from one side to the other. So it's a very, very tiny island. But mum and dad were incredibly supportive throughout my whole time growing up. In fact, I mentioned my 2 brothers who were equally as talented as I was. They both had chances to become professional footballers, and both of them turned it down because they got homesick and they didn't want to leave our tiny island. And so I think my mum and dad saw that. And so from quite an early age, from like about the age of 11, I seem to remember, they would send me away for a week at a time to go to a football school in the UK.
Okay.
And I would go with a friend of mine and his father, and it would get me used to being off the island. So perhaps when my time came to become a professional footballer, I wouldn't suffer the homesickness that my brothers had suffered. And so I think my parents were quite clever in doing that for me, and that's why I have a lot to thank them for.
Yeah, and you benefited from the experience of with your brothers, right?
Definitely. I was amazed that they turned down these opportunities. I was a little kid growing up wanting to be a footballer, and here's my brothers with a chance to do it. and they say no, I don't want to leave.
How old were you at that time when your brothers rejected these offers?
So Kevin was 19, so that means I would have been 13, and Carl was 16, so I would have been 12.
Okay.
So yeah, quite an impressionable age. And obviously then a couple of years later my opportunities came around.
And so when did you realize that, or when did you really want to become a professional footballer? Because when you started at 3, I'm sure it was only for fun. You were having just fun with your brothers and your friends.
Of course. I think I remember probably from about the age of 8.
From the age of 8.
Yeah.
Okay. That's quite early.
Yeah, it's pretty early. But yeah, I can always just remember thinking, wow, I watched these guys on the television playing this football game that I loved, and I was growing up thinking, I really want to do that with my life. That's what I want to do.
Did you have a lot of matches? Did you get to play a lot of matches in Guernsey, because it's a small island and, like you mentioned, only about 60,000 people?
Yeah. So there was only, in my league, there was only 7 teams, I think, in the league, but we would play each other 3 times.
All right.
Through the season. So we would play like 18 league games, and then we would maybe play 3 cup competitions as well. But I was also playing for my school team as well.
Right.
So I played for my club team, which was Vale Rec, the grassroots team that I started with. But I also played some school matches. So there was maybe another 12 games playing for the school. But I also played for different age groups as well. As I was growing up, I was playing in the under 13 team, but I would also be sometimes in the under 16 team.
Wow.
Because I was playing so well at that age, I would move up the age groups quite quickly.
And so the first break came. First time you went out of Guernsey was when you were 15. Is that right?
Yes, it was, but it wasn't to Southampton.
Right.
So the first football club that I actually got involved with is Oxford United, and that was the team that my eldest brother Kevin had turned down.
Right. Okay.
And so through the same contact that my parents had obviously said to this guy who had taken Kevin to Oxford, so my youngest son is wanted to be a footballer as well. He's pretty good, and so I actually left Guernsey at 15 and went to live in Oxford first. But I didn't last very long there. I lasted like 3 weeks because I suffered from homesickness. It was really difficult because I changed my school. So I'd left quite a small school in Guernsey where I knew everybody, and I went to this massive school in Oxford, and I knew nobody. And I was there for 2 days, and no other child in this school spoke to me for 2 days.
So how did your parents react then? Because they might be seeing the same story repeating again a third time.
Yeah, possibly. But I think at that point, Southampton had already offered me a trial.
Okay.
So even though I left to come back to Guernsey, I knew I had a trial at Southampton coming up, and I assured my parents that I still want to do this. But the whole school thing was too difficult, and I was maybe a bit too young to leave home.
All right.
So what happened was I went back to Guernsey, went back to my old school, and then when I had the trial with Southampton, when Southampton signed me as a schoolboy, they actually allowed me to stay on Guernsey and finish my schooling in Guernsey. So I was able to finish my schooling in Guernsey, and during the holiday periods I would come over to Southampton and train for a week at a time with all the other players. And so I did that until I finished my school, and that's when, after I'd finished all my exams, that's when the decision was made to actually decide whether you're going to be an apprentice or whether you were going to be released. And so I was one of the lucky ones that got chosen. And then, so by this time now, I've turned 16, and then I left in June of 1985, and even that extra year back in Guernsey, I matured a lot as a person, and I was ready then at 16 to leave.
Yeah, I mean it's and then of course it's crazy how you made your debut at 17, I think, for Southampton. But we'll come to that. But before that, what I could understand is that the schooling decision played a very important part. Like whether you coming back from Oxford or joining Southampton, the way your schooling system was organized, that played a big role in your progress as a professional footballer.
Yeah, it did. So actually, through my playing for my school, I then became able to play in the Ireland team. So my Guernsey team in the under-15s, it was whilst playing for them that I got spotted by a Southampton scout. So we had a game in Southampton, and so I was the centre midfielder for my team at the time. And the manager had come to me this particular game, and he said to me, I know you're going to be one of my centre midfielders for the big game coming up. He said, but I want to see who's going to play alongside you. He said, so I'm going to look at the two boys that I'm going to choose between. So you're not going to play centre midfield today. He said, can you go and play on the right wing? And I said, okay, yeah, that's fine, no problem. So I play this game on the right wing. I have no idea at this point that there's a Southampton scout watching the game. And so I played right wing. I obviously did pretty well, and on the back of that, I was invited for the trial to Southampton. So I turned up at the trial for Southampton, and they played me as a right winger because they don't know that I was.
They thought you were a right winger.
Yeah, they don't know that I was a centre midfielder just playing out of position in this one game. And so when I turned up, I didn't want to say anything. I was just like grateful to be there, and I just thought I'd just give it my best shot while I'm here. And
I think it also speaks volumes about your ability as a player. Even despite playing out of position, you actually got noticed by the Southampton scout and got invited.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things that I would actually say to young players, if I give them any advice, is to learn more than one position on a football pitch. I think if you can actually make yourself more useful to your manager by being able to play well in 2 or 3 positions, then you got a bigger chance of keeping your place in the team, and you become really useful to your manager in the professional game. So, and I also think as a development for your development as a footballer, if you actually go and play in different positions, especially if you go and play in the opposite position to what you normally play, I think it gives you valuable insights into what can cause you problems. So when you go back and play in that position, you can think, when I was playing against that position, this gave me a problem. So I'm going to go and do that because I know this causes this person a little bit of a problem with positional things. So I think great piece of advice for young kids is play in lots of different positions growing up, and you get a more rounded understanding of the game.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, also like what I get a sense based on our interactions over the last couple of days is that you were also very smart, right? I mean, just thinking about playing different positions, you are also mentally very flexible, and which helped you. And I'm sure being scouted in out of position, and then I'm sure when you got shortlisted for Southampton, it also gave you a lot of confidence because now you know that even out of position I was doing well. So when you put me in my strong position, I would definitely do better.
No, that's a very good point. It was big for me because I grew up, as I said, on that tiny little island, and I knew I was a good player in my environment, but I didn't know if there were lots of me on the mainland. I didn't know how good I would be when I joined, everybody from the mainland. So to be able to actually, get my position in the club and be spotted, and them to say, okay, we like what we see. We think you've got a chance. Here's a chance for you. So that was huge for my confidence. Yeah, and that was one of the main stumbling blocks I think I probably had when I was growing up in Guernsey, knowing that I was good there, but how good was I when I go over there?
So when did you realize how good you were? Did you ever realize, what was that time when you realized that, okay, I am now gonna do well in the Premier League, the most competitive and most physical, fastest league in the world?
Yeah, so there was a little progression towards that. So when I joined Southampton at 16, and I'm playing in the youth team at Southampton, this was when I'm playing with my boys that I've obviously just trained with for the last year. I knew that these players were pretty good too, and so when I got in the team, in the Southampton youth team, I started scoring goals straight away. Wow. Right from the very first game I scored. In fact, I missed a penalty in my very first game for the Southampton youth team. Not a lot of people know that. Kishore, I've given away a little secret there. I missed a penalty in my first ever game for the Southampton youth team, but I scored in the game as well, apart from the penalty. And then a few weeks into the season, I remember winning one game against Brighton, and we won like 9-0, and I scored 6 goals in the game. And at that point, I thought, okay, this is going pretty good. I'm comfortable with where I am now. I think I'm ready to try and go up the level. And we had a reserve team at Southampton. Right. So it wasn't like an under 21 or an under 23 team back then. We had like the first team, and then we had a reserve team which was full of, experienced professionals as well who just weren't playing in the first team. And so that was the first step, to go from the youth team to get into the reserve team. Now, I was pretty lucky, so I played a few games in the reserve team, and then the manager, Chris Nichol, who was our manager at the time, had seen something in me that he liked, and I pretty much bypassed the reserve team. So I played a few games, but then I was put straight into the first team squad the following season.
Yeah, I mean, joining Southampton at after 15, and then getting drafted into the senior team by 17, it's a pretty quick progress, very fast. How did you prepare mentally? Like, when did you get intimidated when you kind of took the field for Southampton for the first time, the first team?
Yeah, probably a little bit the first time. So my first ever game for the Southampton University wasn't in a competitive game, so it was a friendly match in pre-season, and we played against one of the lower league teams in the Pyramid down at Exeter, and I played in a game down there. I played a game in a Torquay in pre-season, so they were like fairly competitive games, but playing alongside experienced professionals, and I felt okay, and then I was left out of the squad for the first couple of games of the season. And then I was called into the squad when we went to play an away game at Norwich City. I was sat on the bench as a substitute, and I actually made my debut. I came on as a substitute against Norwich, only for about 15 minutes.
Okay.
But I do remember feeling pretty nervous, going on the pitch there. It was an away game as well, so I didn't have all the home fans. It didn't have the comfort of being in my own stadium. So I found it a little bit uncomfortable in that game. And then just 3 days later, we played against Tottenham Hotspur, and I'm now in the team. So I make my full debut, but I'm now in my home stadium, and I've got all the support of the people in the stadium, and that made a big difference. I think to make my full debut at home, I think is a lot easier than to make it away from home.
And were your parents there to see?
They were, yeah. So I was really lucky. My manager at the time, I mentioned Chris Nichol. He'd actually. The day before the game, he'd called me into his office, and he said, "Tomorrow," he said, "I'm going to be playing you." Because normally, sometimes they name the team only on the day of the game. So, but he made sure he told me the day before the game, and so I phoned my parents and I said, "Look, I'm playing tomorrow. You need to." So they were booking their flights, and I think actually. About 23 of my family and wider family members came across and watched my debut. They all had enough time to just organise flights, and a couple of them came on the boat because the flight was full up. And but yeah, 23 of them came across.
It's a big thing for Guernsey.
Yeah, huge thing, because I don't think Guernsey had a professional footballer for probably like 15 or 20 years or something like that. So it was a long time before.
Of course, once you started for Southampton, you just took off, and it seems almost like a fairy tale, the whole career that you've had.
There were a couple of bumps along the way.
Yeah. I'm very interested in knowing about those bumps. Like, what were the biggest challenges?
Absolutely. So the first season, I was on the substitutes bench quite a lot, because I was obviously still very young, and the manager was kind of just gently easing me into the team. But I ended up scoring 10 goals by the end of that season, including my first...
At 17?
I was 17 when I started the season. By the time, I turned 18 in October. So by the end of the season, I was 18. And I also scored my first hat-trick for Southampton that season as well. So
this was against?
Good. This was against Leicester.
Okay.
Yeah, and all I can remember from the day, I remember scoring the goals, but my abiding memory of the day is that it was so cold that day. It actually snowed. Wow. We had snow on the pitch that day. But luckily, it was one of the few games that my dad had chosen to come across and watch. So my mum wasn't there, but my dad had come, and so he saw me score my first hat-trick. So that was the first season. That went all pretty well. Second season, not quite so well. So I struggled with a bit of a lack of form. I had a couple of disciplinary issues where I would play in the second team, in the reserve team, and I was red carded twice.
Okay.
In quick succession, maybe in the space of like 2 or 3 weeks. So I missed a load of games through suspension. And I only scored 2 goals that season. So it was a real drop down from the season before.
Did it create any doubt in your mind, or that of the coach?
Not really. I still had the support of the manager. I still made quite a few appearances, so they could still see the potential was there, and they saw what I'd done the previous season. But it's pretty normal, and my youth team coach, actually, Dave Merrington, was really good at that point, because he explained to me about the progression of young players isn't just
Straight line.
Or like this. He said there is going to be ups and downs, especially with young players. Form goes up, form goes down. Things will happen, injuries might happen, suspensions, which did happen. And he made me realise early on that, okay, this is normal. Sometimes it's just not all on one lovely trajectory on the way up. So I had a bump in the road that season. And then the following season I came back stronger. I'd scored 11 goals by halfway through the season. Was going pretty well. And then I hit another dip. And I didn't really score towards the back end of the season. So there was another period there that was just like, okay, I've got double figures in goals again, but the last bit of the season wasn't very good. So then I came back the next season, and I'm now 20 years of age, and so I'm thinking, okay, I've had a couple of seasons, it's going okay, but this could be better. And then I had a really big break in the 89-90 season. So I started that season at 20 years of age. So the guy who was in front of me in the team was a guy called Danny Wallace, who Southampton then sold to Manchester United.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, there's a regular spot in the team, because I'd been fighting to try and get in the team. I'd been substitute a lot, but all of a sudden I've now really got this spot in the team, and there's not a lot of competition behind me. So I was like, okay, this is a good opportunity for me. So I have a really good long run in the team, and I end up that season. I scored 24 goals. I win the Young Player of the Year for the Premier League, or the First Division as it was back then. And that was when I was like, okay, now I'm good. I've now arrived.
Yeah.
I knew I could do this, but I've now proved to myself I can really do it. And I've got a really good season behind me. And this was the season when Tottenham tried to buy me at the end of that season.
But it was still quite early in your career, because you were still 2021.
Absolutely.
So I would still call those like maybe teething problems when you're just getting used to that grind and the pressure. And everything.
No, absolutely. And this is also one of the things that was in my thinking when I turned down the move to Tottenham, is that I'm still pretty young here. I've only had one really good full season, and so I was like, no, I don't think this is right. And then obviously there was other issues with my fiance as well, who didn't want to go to live in London. So all these things were taken into consideration when I made the decision to stay at Southampton. And the following season went very well again. I think I scored 23 goals the following season. The team didn't do quite as well the second that second season, because in the previous season we'd finished 7th in the First Division. But the second season we actually dropped down. And we finished like 15th, so it was quite a big drop in terms of the team performance, and that led to the manager being sacked. Okay. And so we then bring in a new manager who wants to play a completely different style of football, and the new manager doesn't really like the way that I play football. So he was a manager that was very old school in terms of I call it the long ball game. So he didn't want intricate passing. He just wanted to play balls into the channel. He wanted to get set pieces, and it didn't really suit the way that I played football. So this was probably the biggest bump in my career with that manager, to prove to him that I was still worthy of a place in the team.
Just when you were kind of getting confident and steady, a sudden change, which would,
2 really good seasons as a young boy, and the new manager comes in. We play a different way. My goal scoring output goes down.
Right.
So I think I only scored 15 goals that season, I think it was. And he didn't really like the way that I played, so he ended up dropping me out of the team. And so the following season, actually the second season, I got 18 goals, so my goals output went up a little bit, but still the football wasn't very enjoyable. Right. And it was a bit of a struggle. And then the following season, he He drops me out the team for 5 games in a row. The fans are going mad because the fans want me in the team. And so in those 5 games, we don't win any of the 5 games. So he brings me back into the team. And the day that I come back into the team, we play against Newcastle, and it's live on the television. Like, it's the big Sunday afternoon game. And I scored 2 of the best goals of my career in the same game. And we win the game 2-1. And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, I'm back, and the manager can't drop me now.
Yeah, and in fact, you became his savior in a way.
I became his, and you know what? 6 weeks later, he makes me captain of the team.
So that's where I think a lot of the young footballers can learn, like despite not getting, not fitting in terms of the style of play, working with a different coach who doesn't really suit your style, but still when you came on, after being dropped for 5 games, being the star player of the team, being dropped for 5 games, but still when the challenge came, instead of reacting negatively, you actually responded in the best way that was possible.
Absolutely.
So what was going on through your mind? Because this is something that most players go through.
Yes.
I mean, they may get a very good caring coach at the youth level, but at the professional level, it can be very unforgiving. It can be ruthless.
Very
so
ruthless.
What was going on through your mind when you were getting dropped, when you were the coach was, you're not getting along well with the coach?
I think for me, I took the attitude that, so I didn't fall out with my coach.
Okay.
So I never confronted him.
That's quite commendable as well.
Yeah, no, I wasn't.
How did you respond when he was benching you?
Yeah, so my response, actually, I was actually given back, if you like, to my youth team coach. So when I was out the team, my manager had said, you're not good enough at the moment, don't want you in my team. So they gave me back to my old youth team coach, who knew me as a person, and he knew what made me tick, and he knew what training I liked. So he gave me back to my youth team coach, and I trained with my youth team coach again for 2 or 3 weeks. Okay. And he worked on all the things that he knew that I liked, and he built my confidence up again, because obviously being dropped in the team is not good for your confidence.
Yes.
So he built me back up again, and I took the opportunity when the manager brought me back in the team, because of the training that I'd had. My confidence was back up, and I went into that game and I was like, okay, I'm good to go. And so, I didn't react badly to the manager. I didn't sulk. I got on with my work, and I put my head down, and I trained, and I made sure I got another chance in the team.
And for the rest of your career, did you face any other challenges, or this was the biggest?
I think probably the only other real challenges after that were towards the back end of my career, when I started getting some injuries. And that's another thing that professional footballers have to come to terms with. Sometimes you will get injured. There's very few players who go through their career without having a period of time not being able to play, and that's something that's really frustrating for a professional footballer. It's your job, and you love playing football, but your body isn't allowing you to do it, and so you've got to be patient, but also you've got to be professional and make sure you do your rehab right, and give yourself the best possible chance. I probably didn't help myself maybe in the early part of my career or the middle part of my career, because there were times when I had injuries, but I carried on playing because I knew how important I was to the team. I knew maybe even if I was 70% fit, that I could still make a difference in the game. Right. So I played a lot of games when I wasn't really fully fit. Today, the players don't do that so much. And you have bigger squads now, so that if a player is injured, there's somebody to come in for him. We didn't really have that luxury, so I had to carry on playing through injuries. And I think towards the back end of my career, I think I paid for that a little bit with the injuries that I picked up at the back end of my career.
It's like a debt that you incur.
Yeah,
you have to pay back with interest.
Absolutely. So that's why I ended up retiring when I was just 33 years of age. Because I kind of was having these injuries, and I kept coming back from them, and I kept making the same injury over and over again, and it was like my body is just telling me you can't do what you used to do anymore, and enough is enough. So I just said, okay, I'll listen to my body. I've got the rest of my life to live. I'm not gonna jeopardize the rest of my life just to try and get another 1 or 2 years out of my football career. So at 33, I said, okay, my body's telling me I've got to listen to it. I've had enough.
Yeah, I mean, also one thing I just noticed, just going back to the previous point, like when you were off form, being able to go back to the youth coach that you had, that's where I think a setup like Southampton can play a big role,
Yes.
which a lot of clubs may not have.
No.
Because you had come from the youth system.
Yeah.
So, the moment you faced a challenge at the senior team, you could actually go back to a support system within that club itself.
Yeah.
Which probably, played a big role in
Absolutely, it's fantastic. And that's one of the benefits of having a bit of consistency in the staff at the football club. Yeah. So, when I started in 1985, Dave Merrington was my mentor. I call him my mentor. He's my most important person in my football career. That was 1985. He was my youth team coach. When I'm talking about this period of time, this is like 1993, 8 years later, and he's still there.
He's been following you.
He's still there. He knows me,
for you.
and he's always been there for me throughout all the ups and downs. I could always go to him and talk to him, go back and train with him sometimes so he was always a constant rock. And in fact, he then became the manager of the team.
Okay.
So when the manager that made me captain, who had dropped me, so when he made me captain, about 4 weeks after he made me captain, he was sacked. Okay. So then we bring in Alan Ball, who was my favourite manager, with amazing, and I had a brilliant 18 months. That was the best 18 months of my career when Alan Ball was my manager. So then Alan Ball does well, the team do well, and he gets headhunted by Manchester City. So Manchester City come and steal our manager. And so at this point, the football club are going, oh no, I'm now the star man in the team. I'm scoring all the goals. And so I think what the football club did, they looked at it and said, okay, who do we appoint as manager that's going to be best for Matt Le Tissier? And so Dave was working still at the club. So they promoted him to the manager.
So Alan did not try to get you to Man City?
No, I think he knew that
you wouldn't leave Southampton. You're too loyal for the club.
Yeah, so then they appointed Dave Merrington. He was manager of the first team for one season, but things didn't really work out that well for Dave. I think Dave's strong points in his coaching and the way that he was much better suited to the younger players. And I think it was very difficult for him with the more experienced older players to implement his methods. So we stayed up on the last day of the season, but Dave was sacked after just one season.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very common experience that we have also had. Like when we promote youth coaches to the profession of the senior team, they often struggle to decide between compassion and empathy and results, ruthlessness to get those results at the professional level. So that is
different
a
mentality.
Shift. Yeah, that's a shift that they have to that many find difficult to undergo, but if one has to, then they have to do it like in a very conscious way.
Yes.
Change your mindset, mentality, like you said, from a youth coach, a caring, nurturing coach to a delivering coach results. Someone who can deliver results. Right. And so now talking about your loyalty to the club, of course, it's part of your part of Southampton FC folklore now. You got offers from so many big clubs like Chelsea, Spurs. I read somewhere even Man United, Liverpool as well. What made you stay with Southampton FC? Because these are like big, huge names, and it's the dream of almost every footballer to play for some of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really my dream to play for a big team. I just wanted to be a footballer. I didn't really, it didn't really bother me to go and want to play for a team that was winning the league title. I felt like I had something to Southampton that I owed them because they give me my big chance to fulfill my dreams in life. To be a footballer, to play for England. Yes. I did all those things while I was at Southampton. And so I felt like I owed them. I felt like I owed the fans who were always brilliant to me from the very, very first time I played. So I felt like I owed them. And I'll be honest, I enjoyed being the big fish in the small pond.
Okay.
And people don't like to admit those kind of things, but I don't have an ego. I don't care. I tell the truth. I just tell people how I feel. And so for me, actually being, the big fish in the small pond, it suited my personality. And the part of the country that I was living in Southampton, it's a beautiful part of the country. One of the best parts of the UK. And I didn't want to leave there. My personal happiness came above everything else in my life. So I needed to be happy. Where I was living, I needed to be happy. And if I'm in a position where I'm happy with everything in my life, I don't want to uproot it just so that I can go and earn a few more pounds somewhere else. The money wasn't important to me. I didn't play football for money.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, these are some of the things that I think personally as well, I feel it's very important to teach the younger generation.
When I was listening to your presentation and what you were talking about there, I'm thinking this man has very similar values to me in life.
I not just you, I think the entire Southampton FC value system, I resonate so
absolutely
well with all of you.
This is why the partnership, I think, will work very well.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm quite sure, like if the people are aligned in terms of their purpose and values, etc., there's no reason why it cannot last a lifetime and maybe beyond, because human values, they remain till the time humanity would exist.
And you pass it down the generations.
Money can change, the form of currency might change, things change, but values don't change.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's amazing. So again, another reason why I'm so grateful and so privileged and so happy to have met you.
Likewise.
Thank you so much. So next question, let's now go to after your playing days were over, right? And how did you tackle that? I mean, did you find, because looking, my guess is that you may not have faced so much of an issue because you were emotionally very intelligent, I think. But still, I don't know. I mean, I'm just guessing. But
yeah,
but little bit when life changes from being like the talk of the town to now having to hang your boots. Not going to the pitch anymore, the next home game, now watching it from the stands.
Yeah.
How did it feel?
I didn't find it too bad to finish playing football, to be honest. Because I knew my body couldn't do what it used to be able to do, I was kind of ready for it. Okay. And so from that point of view, I didn't really struggle. A lot of players do struggle. I probably missed a little bit of the daily interaction with going into the changing room with my teammates and all that kind of stuff. But I was actually looking forward to giving my body a rest and not having to train 5 times a week and play games. So I didn't struggle with it. I then kind of went into the media, and I was quite fortunate. I'd had a testimonial match at Southampton, and obviously I'd made a nice amount of money there. Not enough to kind of see me through the rest of my life, but I had enough to be able to take a step back and just see what I wanted to do for a few years. So I just had a lot of fun. I played a lot of golf, and I kind of just waited for opportunities to see what would come up. The media things came up, and I quite enjoyed that. So I kind of went into that, and I ended up doing 18 years in the media, commentating on football and talking about football, and I'd like to think that in that time, my passion for the game and my knowledge of the game, I was able to pass on to people watching through the television screens.
Yeah, I mean, again, another example of how you readily accepted the reality. Like you said, some players find it difficult because probably they find it hard to accept the reality, and maybe as they grow as become more successful as a professional footballer, with all the fans and with all the media attention and all, they tend to build a bubble around them. Yeah. And then it becomes more and more difficult.
I think what sometimes happens is that because obviously as a professional footballer, you have this, this time in the limelight, and you have this fame and fortune. And I think some people then, when it's gone, they struggle to cope with that. And I think that's people's egos. And I don't have an ego. I'm a very normal bloke. I come from humble beginnings, and I will go back to humble beginnings. And so the transformation from being, the talk of the town and the star footballer to just being, I'm just a normal guy now, and I go and sit in the stands and watch my team play. I didn't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah, you didn't have to make a transition because you were a normal guy, even before that.
Absolutely, I always lived a normal life, even though I was the star footballer in Southampton. You can ask anybody in the mid-90s in Southampton. I would just be the guy. I would go in restaurants with everybody else. I would go shopping in the malls. I would walk around Southampton, and people were always okay. Maybe sometimes they stopped for an autograph or a photograph, but not obsessively, and then they would give you your space. And it was, Southampton fans are, they're not like a Newcastle fan where it's kind of the be all and end all of their city. You know, sometimes we're a bit more respectful, and so I was able to just live a normal life. And so when I came to retire, it made no difference to me.
Amazing. It's there's so much of great points to learn from your journey. And I think you really made very, very good decisions because that is my assessment. You throughout your career, right from the time you came to Oxford to actually joining Southampton as a youth player to the end of your career, post your playing career as well, I think you ended up making a lot of good decisions because you are a normal person. Because people tend to make wrong decisions when they think they're special.
Yes.
And they try to be too special is when, things go wrong.
I think so. I agree.
Like you said, the ego gets to the head because we think we're special, more special than what we are. Like, I think just being normal is the most special thing is what I feel.
I agree with you. Absolutely. Yeah.
So last question from my side, if based on this entire journey so far and like you are so good at taking the decisions, whether it was a penalty kick decision or off the field, what would you, if there would be any advice that you would give to young footballers, the most important advice which you think, not just in your own career, but you have seen so many talented players throughout your life, even after your playing career now as well. A lot of them succeeding, going on to make it really big, but more people actually failing. More talented players, I'm sure, fail to make the cut, who we never even hear of.
Sure.
Generally.
Yeah.
So looking at all that, putting everything into perspective, what would be your one single advice to young footballers of today?
I think probably the best bit of advice I could give when it comes to decision making is actually to lay your ego to one side and listen to your gut. So just calm yourself and allow yourself that real special time to be able to clear your mind of everything and listen to what your gut is telling you. We are intuitive human beings, and we should listen to ourselves a little bit more sometimes. I think sometimes we get too influenced by outside things when actually all the answers are inside of us. So listen to your gut,
Yep.
lay your ego to one side, and make the right decision.
Sure. Thank you so much, Matt. It's such an enriching conversation. I already, I feel like a better person at the end of this conversation over the last 35-40 minutes.
Thank you.
And such a pleasure again to have you with us. And I hope this is not the last time
I hope
that we
not.
meet and work together.
I will see you in Southampton.
Absolutely. I look forward to that. Not just Southampton. I'm going to come to your place in Guernsey.
Come to Guernsey as well. I'll take you to Guernsey.
Yeah.
You come to Southampton, I'll fly you to Guernsey.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you, Kishore.